What's the worst financial decision you've seen someone make? I knew someone who got a loan for their wedding, but decided to blow it all at a casino. Now they have a loan for $20,000 to pay off and nothing to show for it. A friend of mine who is very bad with money and his girlfriend bought some sort of water filtration system from a door-to-door salesman. He has to pay something like $300 per month for this filtration system. He was all stoked because it came with a free set of pots and pans. Fast forward a year and his girlfriend has broken up with him, moved out of the house, and he's had to sell his home because he can't afford to live there. The water filtration system is now sitting in a storage unit where he still pays $300 per month for it because he's on a 2 or 3 year contract. Sorry, the details are fuzzy. We have great water quality in my area. A coworker I used to have worked every second of overtime he could for several years to save up for a house. When he applied for the house loan, he based his mortgage payment on all of the overtime he had been working. I tried to tell him that wasn't a good idea, but he didn't want to hear it. He ended up divorced a few years later because his wife got tired of him always working. A guy in my fraternity got $30,000 for an undisclosed reason, I'm guessing a family death or something, and he bet it all on the Yankees winning one game. They lost. A dude who owned a small convenience store in our town spent like $20,000 on fidget spinners. He was posting for like a year begging people to buy them as he would lose his business and his marriage was falling apart due to it. My maternal grandmother bought an 8-plex to avoid capital gains when she sold her large house. The apartment complex was in the red and needed a lot of repairs. She hired my father to do them and be on-site manager. The place started making money. My mom, divorced from my dad, was mad that my grandma bought it in the first place, then hired my dad, then was proved wrong because it was making money. My grandma was in her 90s and my mom pressured her for years, so my grandma finally sold it. That place is in a high market area and is now worth millions. My mom made a poor financial decision based on petty spite. My supervisor took out a loan against their 401k to pay their rent because their credit cards were maxed. 2 weeks later, they bought a brand new $60,000 Lincoln with basically nothing down because her daughter just had a baby and I need a bigger car for that. My brother's ex fell for a Craigslist scam. She found a motorcycle and the guy needed money up front to pay bills before she even saw it. We told her don't do it, it's a scam. She said she already sent $1,000. Of course, he was never available to show her the bike, and we found out from my brother after they broke up she actually continued sending him money in hopes of getting the motorcycle. I think she was out $3,000 by the end. My ex-husband got cheated out of tens of thousands of dollars just by being an over-trusting and underthinking seller. He had always wanted a piano his entire life, and one day a friend's father had passed and left them an incredibly amazing and very old piano that she had no use for, so gifted to him. He loved that thing so much. Tuned it and fixed it up. Then a giant ball of tragedies struck that put us in very bad financial situation, causing us to no longer afford where we were currently living and having to move to his family's old home, which is off the mainland and on an island. Being that the only way to get anything moved was by ship and extremely expensive, he had to sell a lot of things. And much to his dismay, the piano was just too big and too heavy to afford to ship there. So he put out a listing to sell it for a very reasonable price. It was an antique, in spectacular condition, made in the early 1900s and was worth at the very least $80,000. He listed it for a fraction of what it was worth due to time constraint on having to get rid of it before the move. Someone contacted him and offered to buy it. And here is where he did something monumentally stupid. The buyer offered to have a truck come and pick up the piano in a very quick time frame and asked if it would be alright to give my husband $1,000 up front and then the rest in 2 weeks when they got paid. I know he was under a lot of stress, but damn, that was dumb. You do not let anyone walk away with an incredibly valuable item without it being paid in full. As I'm sure no one here is shocked by, the person never paid anything else on the piano and just disappeared. The money from that sale alone was pretty much all we were going to have to live off of until he was able to secure a new job in the new location. Scammers are truly awful and many people need to learn not to be so trusting. It's sad. But it's just how it is. My former sister-in-law had a thriving medical practice. She got so stressed that she joined the Scientologist and started taking their classes. She opened up 5-6 credit cards without telling my brother, maxed the cards out with hundreds of thousands in cash withdrawals, and gave it to that cult. My awful aunt was the trustee for my grandparents' estate. When they passed, she decided to sell their house to a random realtor who put a leaflet on the door. To the realtor, not with the realtor. It wasn't put on the market, and the aunt rejected a matching offer by me after I argued hard to actually list the house and have people bid on it. The realtor slapped a new coat of paint on it and sold it a couple of months later for literally $1 million more than she bought it for. My cousin spent 100% of her inheritance and took out a lien on her home to buy a second home in the mountains. Thing is, it was being pushed over by a mountain, and they thought they could fix it. I went and seen it, and every door jamb was crooked and the doors wouldn't shut. They took me down into the basement and they were trying to use I-beams to stop the mountain from pushing on the home. I was just like, what the hell are you doing? That won't solve anything. Fast forward 6 months and they asked me for $50,000 to help and I declined. Fast forward a year and the home collapsed and now they owe over $300,000 plus for a home that doesn't exist, and if they don't make the payments they lose their other house too because they used the original home as collateral and could not get insurance on the second home. Total money lost upwards of $700,000. I won't name any names, but a good friend who literally had it all. The high-rise apartment in a house down the street with a pool, sauna, casita, Hummer, Corvettes, a successful business, and about $400,000 in Bitcoin, threw it all away over a murder for hire. Because him and his, non-related to any of the above successes, but from something about 10 years earlier before I knew him, got greedy, and no longer wanted to split their financial gain with a third person, so yeah. Hired someone on the dark web to carry out the crime across state lines, but communicated everything over text. All 3 men, my friend, his business partner, and guy they hired, have been caught and convicted. One received life in prison, and my friend and his business partner are up for the death penalty. Also, he was only 35 when he was originally arrested. Knew someone who answered those scam emails thinking they would get rich. Last I heard, he lost around $50,000. Emptied out savings account and maxed out credit cards. Left in debt and had to move back with ailing parents. Not a close to them at all, but more like a friend of a friend of a friend's cousin. Motherfucker just would not listen. Genuinely thought he was going to be a millionaire. They kept stringing him along until the bitter end and then, poof. Biggest concern his friends had was him trying to milk his ailing parents for their last nickel and dime. Fortunately, he wised up and knew he'd been had. The last I heard of him was he had an hourly job somewhere and trying to get out of debt. They won thousands of dollars and bought a new entertainment system instead of getting current on their mortgage. Foreclosed on later that year. The thing was, the area had recently become the new it area for young families, and housing prices had skyrocketed. They easily could have just sold the house, paid cash for a larger house 20 minutes up the road, and still had tens of thousands left over. My dad saved like hell his entire life. Staunch minimalist. Had about $1 million saved by his 60s when my parents divorced. My mom, a shopaholic, fought him in court and received $800,000 from him, which he just let her have because all he wanted to do was live in a tiny house he already owned outright and spend the remainder of his years traveling in the cheapest countries. He's still self-sufficient to this day at age 75 and has been to around 45 countries in the last 10 or so years. My mom spent the $800,000 in less than 5 years. She bought nothing but garbage. Collectible angels, a bedroom suite, a house she couldn't afford. Just shopped and shopped. She yelled at me this week for refusing to pay her electric bill, which is about to be disconnected. A friend of mine who is very bad with money and his girlfriend bought some sort of water filtration system from a door-to-door salesman. He has to pay something like $300 per month for this filtration system. He was all stoked because it came with a free set of pots and pans. Fast forward a year and his girlfriend has broken up with him, moved out of the house, and he's had to sell his home because he can't afford to live there. The water filtration system is now sitting in a storage unit where he still pays $300 per month for it because he's on a 2 or 3 year contract. Sorry, the details are fuzzy. We have great water quality in my area. I watched a sorority sister sink thousands of dollars into an MLM. When that one flopped and left her with like 5,000 unsold leggings, she took out a loan to invest in yet another MLM to recoup her costs from the first one. So I guess that counts as 2 extremely poor decisions. I know of at least one guy who lost it all at the casino. Was standing there with my GF and this dude had monster stacks of chips at the roulette wheel, $100,000 to $500,000 worth, easy. 5 minutes after I took a piss, when I came out of the can, the guy was holding no chips, I shit you not. My GF said he lost everything in one spin and we watched him cry his eyes out. It was sad. Friend was told by his dad to always replace his used car every 3 years, even if it is still working just fine. Why? Now, because of constant trade-ins that are less than the value of the original loans and new used cars, new loans stacking up, and poor credit, my friend currently owes $35,000 and drives a 2009 Toyota that needs a lot of repairs. His first car was a perfectly fine Honda in perfect condition that, I believe, he could have paid off easily and would still be driving today. This friend also put his dad's name on his saving account with the full awareness that his dad is not trustworthy, and now that account has been emptied and given to his dad's mistress. I know a couple who spent $125,000 on their wedding. Their marriage lasted less than 4 years. They ended up arguing over who had to pay which part of the debt. I didn't want the fucking flowers in the first place. During their divorce settlement negotiations, they were each still paying for the first wedding when they married their second spouses. I spent the night at my friend's house when I was around 14-ish, and at their house, they had I think 4 or 5 kids. I was friends with the oldest. We didn't eat any dinner at any point and we're all getting hungry. The kids asked to have some money to walk to the grocery store to grab hot dogs and stuff to make a quick cheap dinner. Mom said, I only have $15 and that's my cigarette money. We all ended up not eating anything. Added, I just want everyone to know that this was almost 13 years ago and all the children are just fine, grown up, moved out, and a few have kids of their own. Hopefully they learn to treat their children differently, but I don't exactly know. This guy I knew went from being on mom and dad's bill to his own because he fucked up in school. So instead of getting a cheap apartment close to campus, he picks one of the most expensive apartments in town, where no utility is included, got the cable/internet add-on, got the several $100 parking pass, and continued to eat out and drink on a regular basis. You will be as shocked as I was to learn that that didn't work out and he had to move back in with his parents. A 43-year-old woman I know got hooked by a Nigerian romance scam. Not only did she send this guy all her money, she flew to Nigeria and married him. He's 21 years old. She couldn't stay in Nigeria because of her job. Her intention is to get him back to our country, but he really has no intention of leaving, as she funnels all of her money to him and, I believe, helps him scam other women. He's living a pretty sweet Nigerian life. She went from living a decent life to moving into her grandmother's basement with her developmentally delayed daughter so she could send all of her money to him. If he can't immigrate, her ultimate goal is to move to Nigeria with her daughter. Edited to add, the child is about 20 years old. So I was a teller line manager in college. One day this 19-year-old kid comes in with a check for like $350,000. Obviously this is unusual, so I start to chat him up to make sure he wasn't getting scammed or something. This was when the Nigerian prince scam was just starting out. Turns out his dad had died and this was the life insurance check he got. So I'm like, well, it sucks that your dad died, but at least he thought ahead to take care of you. Let me set you up with one of our advisors, and if you play your cards right you'll be retired comfortably by 40. No, he says, I'm buying all my friends' cars. And he did. The worst part is he didn't even buy them good cars, he was buying okay used cars, like a 7-year-old Civic. He came in every couple days for like 3 months to get a couple cashier's checks for like $6,500 to buy each of his friends several cars. By the end of the 3 months the money was gone. That was about 15 years ago, so using quick math, rule of sevens, he'd have about $1.5 million at this point. I wonder if he will ever think back and realize that he fucked up bad. Well, the accountant at the small business I work at does a lot of funny things with money. Has a perfectly good, paid-off car, but it was slightly too old to drive for Uber, to make extra money, so she got a lease on a brand new car through Uber. After a month she found out she wasn't making enough extra money from Uber to even pay the lease, and her commute was too far to drive the Uber car to work and back, because they limit the miles. After she weaseled out of her Uber lease, she decided she needed a brand new Harley that she had no idea how to drive. This was over a year ago. She has ridden it exactly once around her neighborhood. She will be paying for this motorcycle for another 4 years at least. She took out a second mortgage on her home to fix it up to get ready to sell. She is so happy with the remodel that she is keeping the house. She is a single mother twice over, and is always telling us how some nice man from her church paid for her daughter's school trip or whatever. She is the dumbest person I have ever met, and I am always a little freaked out that she is handling our money. Divorce. Growing up, we were good friends with a family that had made it big with buying/selling airplane parts pre-internet age. The couple went through a nasty divorce that got strung out over a 6-year period. The wife was 100% convinced through her shitbag lawyers that her husband had funneled money into secret accounts. He didn't, and wasn't happy with his initial offer, the mansion, half the multi-millions, and $5,000 a month for child support alone. The court proceedings went on for years. And at the end of it all, they both pretty much had nothing due to court fees and lawyer fees. His business failed because of how unstable air travel became after September 11th. If she had just split things and taken that with the mansion and the other payments, she would have gotten $4.2 million from the divorce, not having worked a day in her life. TLDR, divorce is a hell of a drug. I have an idiot friend who's getting something like 30% of his wages garnished. Why? Because he forgot to pay his student loan. He's shit at paying bills, and it's not because he doesn't make the money for it. He has a decent job. He just literally ignores paper mail and emails reminding him and then eventually demanding him to pay off things like credit card bills and his student loans. If he does bother to read them, it literally goes in one ear and out the other. Just slides right out of his mind. After a few months he'll remember, log into his account, pay the payment in full with accrued interest and shrug it off like it's normal. Somehow he forgot to pay his student loans for something like a year and it went to collections. I told him he could even just set up automatic payments for that shit, and he agrees it's a good idea, and then just never does it. I offered to set it up for him and it's always later. A friend at 37 who have never worked any job that pay above minimum wages inherited tons of money from his father. Despite having absolutely no experience in any of those positions or even how to run/manage a business, suddenly open up a restaurant which was a disaster from day one and closed down not long afterward. Decided to get into photography business, throw away tons of money on all super fancy equipment he have absolutely no idea what is for or how to use. Never made a penny. Tried to start a DJ business. No bite. Disappeared off face of the earth right afterward. A guy I worked with was always complaining that he was poor, although I later found out that this was solely due to bad budgeting and impulse spending. He was really good at his job, so I suggested that he do some freelance IT security consulting on the side. He did a job for a high-end jeweler which paid him around £2,000 for 2 days' work. He was ecstatic that he finally had enough money to fix all the problems he'd been putting off for ages, like the oil leak on his car, a new pair of work shoes, and get his boiler fixed. At the end of the job, he was leaving the retailers with cash in hand when he spotted a high-end watch in a display case which was £2,000 down from £3,500 or so. Unable to pass up such a bargain, he handed the £2,000 back and walked out with the watch instead. 2 days later he was complaining because his fridge was empty. My response was, at least you can use the watch to time how long it takes you to starve. Grew up fairly wealthy, went to a private school with lots of other wealthy kids. Knew one girl who had 2 wealthy parents pass away when she was young. She lived with an uncle. She was messed up as a kid, really wild, always the first to try everything. In her own way incredibly sweet, always protected the less popular kids. Anyways, she hits 21, gets a huge trust fund. Her uncle puts up a fight for the money because he knows she's going to go nuts with it. It wasn't for the cash, he had much more than her. Ultimately he loses and she gets everything. It's the beginning of the end for her. She blows through massive wealth in 2 years doing untold amounts of cocaine, binge drinking, trips to crazy places, constantly surrounded by people using her for party money. We're talking millions of dollars here. Not a cent invested anywhere. Anyways, 2 years later she's back with the uncle, not a penny to her name. He loves her, so of course takes her in. Everyone that hung on to her for the past 2 years is gone, everyone laughs at her behind her back. A few overdoses and drug use left her a little slow. She tries school but it doesn't work. Her uncle gave her a job, but it's a token thing. At least she's lucky enough that she had someone to look after her in the end. We've reached the end of the video once again. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to get notified whenever my next video drops, make sure to subscribe. I'm posting once or twice a week. Also let me know your thoughts on the stories. Until next time.